So that was pretty natural to be motivated to go further, and that just took on a life of its own very quickly because then I wanted to go further, further, and further.
Off Gassing, a Scuba Podcast with host Nick Hogel. On today's show, I sit down and have a conversation with Jarrod Jablonski, an aquatic lover from a very young age, learning to swim before he could walk. It was only natural for him to find his way to the underwater world. His drive for exploration led him to create a new standard with global underwater explorers, conservation, underwater caves, deep dive Dubai, and much more in this episode of Off Gassing, a Scuba Podcast. Jarrod, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing very well, Nick. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, no, thank you very much for coming on. So are you in Dubai right now?
At the moment I am. I just got back from a series of expeditions in Brazil, and I'm now here for a few weeks before actually the China dive show comes up.
Oh, okay. Is that the ADEX show?
It's DRT, actually. ADEX
okay.
is in Singapore, yeah. So I did that recently, but the DRT show is really the first time I think we've had a public access China show since the pandemic for the diving community. So I'm excited to get over there and see everybody again.
Awesome. Yeah, I was actually, I was in Shanghai right after they opened for a work trip. It was my first trip to China. And it was definitely a very unique, amazing experience. It's literally a whole nother world over there. So I had a really good, and that is, I want to say it is in Shanghai, correct? Or I might be totally wrong.
It is. The DRT show is in Shanghai as well. They actually run it in multiple cities, but the one I'm going to in a couple weeks is in Shanghai.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I think they had one in Malaysia here this year at some point. Maybe, I can't remember when, but I want to say it was this year in Malaysia. My first question I wanted to ask you is, tell me how and why you got into scuba diving. That first breath underwater, did it capture you like most people, I'm assuming, or was it something that you had to kind of ease yourself into?
For me, it was a natural extension of my love for the water. So I've always really been very passionate and aquatic lover since a very young age. My mother actually taught me to swim before I could walk. So she further fueled or helped to create, depending on your perspective, my love of the underwater world. I swam competitively from a young age. So I was always in the water, around the water. I grew up in Florida, so beach was always nearby. So scuba diving was just a very natural extension, and as I was super comfortable in the water, scuba diving was a very natural fit, and I really enjoyed the idea that I could just stay under as opposed to just on a breath hold. So that was a really magical kind of experience, I think, as for many, when you first take that first breath underwater and get to feel what it's like to be more fish-like than man-like.
Oh, that's awesome. And so when you took that first class, did you instantly know that I'm going for I'm continuing my education, I'm going for the advanced, I'm going for the rescue? Like, how was that progression? Or was it a slow progression, or was it just like, I'm hooked, I'm in, let's do it?
Well, I knew I would be in, and I knew that I would continue diving. I don't think I really, at the very beginning, I don't think I had good visibility as to exactly how much diving I might do or how much I might get into the activity as a broad rule. I've been an athlete most of my life, so I was playing American football at the time, basketball, track. So I had a lot of things going on as I was learning to dive. I was in high school at the time, 15 years old. I did the course with my father, so it was it was something I knew I wanted to continue doing. I just didn't know how much time I would have because I was unclear about the other passions I might pursue. And as it turned out, when I went up to college, I had a unique opportunity there to get into a large and developing academic diving program at the University of Florida in Gainesville. And that program allowed me to meet a lot of very enthusiastic divers and begin diving and become an instructor pretty quickly upon arriving into the university. And then I taught as part of the way that I paid my way through school. I taught for them, and I taught Ginny Springs, a local dive resort in the area. And that sort of ignited or at least cemented my activity in the career-oriented trajectory.
Those other sports that you were playing, was there ever a thought of pursuing one of those?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I had a long history with American football. I started playing football actually at the University of Florida. My mom was always a big advocate of continuing on the swimming side. Truth is, I probably don't have the natural frame for either, particularly, as things continue to evolve. I don't have the Michael Phelps wingspan. I don't think I have quite the body size and shape for true, high-level professional sports, but I think we can all dream anyway. So I did a bit.
Oh, that's awesome. And I appreciate you saying American football too, because I mean, I'm originally from the States, but I'm living out here in Malaysia, and I'll catch myself sometimes in some confusing conversations because I forget to put the American in front of the football, and people are like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it does get confusing. I actually get more confused when people from international community talk about soccer because I know that's so unnatural for them to say that word.
So in college, that experience that you had, what led you into, I guess, the caves, or how did that all progress?
Yeah, it provided access to a group of very motivated divers, several of whom became good friends. And the group, the sort of main administrative and instructional body at the University of Florida, was really interested in cave diving. There are some of the best caves in the world there in northern Florida, a stone's throw from the university where I was at. And ironically, those springs are inexpensive or free, particularly back then, to dive. So as a college student working multiple jobs to pay my way through school, I quickly identified that actually spring and therefore cave diving was the cheapest option available to me and the most reliable because I could do it pretty much any weather, day or night. I could finish my classes at 7 o'clock and drive to a cave diving site and dive on into the evening since it's dark in the caves anyway. It doesn't really matter whether it's daytime or nighttime. And that was unique access, and the environment just further helped me to see how amazingly cool the underwater world can be. Everything from reefs and wrecks and ice to, caves and a variety of different kinds of cave environments. So I would say that fully ignited my enthusiasm for diving because I was able to see that it had the ability to take me into a lot of very surreal and very exciting environments.
So when you first went into the cave, was there a lot of training prepping up to that, or was it kind of at a time when I'm not sure of the timeline. So how was that progression moving forward? Was it like, oh, this is something I'm into, I need to do more, I need to find the people that can bring me deeper and further?
Well, cave training had been around for a while. This is the late 80s that we're talking about. So there was access to cave training. It was not nearly as developed, and there was not nearly the awareness that there is today. Most of the organizations did not have cave training. All of the big agencies didn't even have technical diving at the time. So your PADIs and your NAUIs and all of those groups didn't do any form of technical diving. This was still when PADI was saying that nitrox was dangerous, and there was a very, very different world to the one today. So there wasn't any mass adoption of more sophisticated forms of deep technical cave kind of diving among all of the large agencies. And so the agencies teaching these activities were more niche in nature. So you had the NACD and the NSSCDS, which were both cave diving dedicated organizations, developed because there was no formal curriculum available anywhere else. And these organizations help to make people aware of the dangers of diving in a cave because a lot of open water divers and instructors just didn't even know what caves were about. So you had a lot of fatalities in the early years by recreational divers and instructors who just didn't really understand, didn't know what they didn't know. So they didn't understand how dangerous the environment could be. these agencies cropped up to deal with that. Some others evolved. INTD, started by Tom Mount, was technically oriented. So I was in the very early years. I think I was instructor trainer number 13 for that agency. So there was early development. I was around for TDI when they first broke away from INTD. So there was this early transition and development. For my own training, to not avoid the subject, speaking candidly, I did almost everything wrong when I started. So I started without training, made plenty of mistakes, probably almost got myself killed, or did almost get myself killed a few times. Realized that I needed to take it more seriously, and then as a group, we began kind of finding our own way. And some years later, I began doing some training, but by then I was already a pretty active cave diver. These are part and parcel of the multiple things I tried to help fix when I founded Global Underwater Explorers, which I'm sure we'll come to at some point. But my experience as an early technical and cave diver are part of what made me interested in developing a different kind of agency.
So when you, in those early days, did you have a mentor, or was it just kind of like, okay, we're going to try this, see what happens, keep going, and then slowly, like a slow build up? Or did you have someone kind of being like, no, this is the correct way? Who is the mentor for you, or was there?
For better or worse, better and worse, I guess we can say, what I had is friends who were at various levels in the same place as myself. So, we had people who were sometimes with a bit of cave training. Some of them had cave training, and many did not. So I think that what I tried to do is take advantage of the ones I knew that had some training and download their experience. And then myself and a few of my friends tried to just be sensible as much as an 18-year-old filled with testosterone and no good common sense can do. And began exploring the caves. So no classic mentor. Later, as I got into exploration, I could probably name some mentors and some inspirations, but in the beginning, nobody in particular.
Okay, well let's talk, I guess, about that when you started to get into exploration. So I'm assuming when you first got into this, was there even a thought of exploration, or was that just a natural progression? Was it like, oh, I got this far, let's see how far I can get next time? Like what led into, obviously some world record expeditions that you've done?
In my I don't know how natural it is, but for me it was it was immediate and natural without any thought. So as a competitive athlete for since I was a young kid, I always just was interested in doing more of whatever I was doing. And so when you start cave diving, I think it's mostly true for anybody that it's a bit addictive to see what's around the other corner, because the environment is so compelling, and once you learn a bit about it and start to understand kind of how it works, it's such a pretty and unique place. Many of your listeners might imagine caves as horrible, dark, low visibility, nasty kind of, single file pushing your way through kind of experiences. And while that does absolutely exist, the majority of caves, particularly those dived by the majority of cave divers, are amazingly beautiful, mostly quite large, usually very clear, if not air clear water. And so it's quite natural. It'd be almost sort of like on an amazing hike in the Grand Canyon, where you're going, through these, fantastic kind of scenes and vistas that you would naturally want to see. Oh, I wonder what it looks like around that corner. So that was pretty natural to be motivated to go further, and that just took on a life of its own very quickly, because then I wanted to go further, and further. And then soon I was like, wow, this is one of for me at the time, and maybe even to some extent still, it was the only kind of environment I had access to where I could go where no human being had ever been before. And that was a pretty enlightening realization that, we have, let's say, hundreds of millions of years of geologic evolution, and we have a few million years of human evolution and about 10,000 years of societal civilization evolution. But, no matter where you go, there probably people have been. Even if you're not sure about it, almost always somebody's been there, unless you're a climber and you make the first descent in a particularly remote mountain, which is even harder and harder and harder to do, maybe almost impossible today. But cave diving, when you explore a cave, you can know quite definitively that no human has ever been there before. And it's a kind of a magical experience to feel that. It's a bit, let's say spiritual for, lack of a better term, to feel yourself in such a unique environment as the only human heart ever beating in that environment. And I found it to be quite addictive very, very early. So I got the first drug for free, and then I needed more.
That's awesome. So I have never been in a cave. I've been in a cavern down in Mexico, the cenotes. I took a course down there, and obviously, I was on vacation. I'm like, oh, let's do the cavern. At the time, I was like, I'm going into the cenotes, the caves, and then I learned more about, oh no, I'm in the cavern zone, not the cave. One thing that you hear a lot about in Mexico as compared to Florida is the Mexico's, it's I don't want to say warmer water, but it's very light flow, kind of shallower caves. And then you hear about Florida caves, and I am making a point at some point to go out there, and I would like to learn, because I'm slowly progressing through my progression, I should say. But there's high flow. It could get, pretty treacherous at times. Is that something that never, or I don't want to say treacherous if that's the wrong word, but is that something that never scared you, or is that something that you enjoy, the high flow, the kind of that aspect of it?
Yes, I guess. I've always enjoyed difficult things. I don't know why. I think there's something broken in my psychology. It seems that the more difficult something is, the more I enjoy it. So if you have any psychoanalysts listening today, they might have some input. But yeah, I didn't. It didn't really strike me as unusual or problematic. It just was pretty intriguing how I might manage to work around or alongside to conquer that aspect of the environment. And caves are pretty unique. They each have their own personality. Some caves are very welcoming and friendly, and some caves are really foreboding, and you have the sense they just don't want you there. I like both of them almost equally for different reasons. And really, Florida also has a wide variety of caves, so there's plenty of caves with almost no flow, a few caves with really strong flow as the aquifers have become more depleted, meaning that we're pumping a lot of water out too much as a conservation kind of point of interest. But that has actually reduced the aggregate or general flow across even the high flow caves in the area. So less and less people are experiencing the fire hose-like conditions that I was diving when I was in the 80s and 90s. They do still kind of occur, but they're much less common across all of the higher flow caves. And even back then, there were low flow caves as well that you could build your experience. And I would say that, just to speak to your point, and not as a sales pitch for cave diving, but as a general rule, cave diving is mostly treacherous if you just don't know what you're doing. And if you do take some time, get some quality education, and don't act like an idiot, which I freely admit I did do in the beginning, but I discourage that because it's a lot more fun actually to learn a bit about what you're doing and explore the environment in a more responsible way. And in that case, I would say that the caves are only as dangerous as you make them. So you can make them super dangerous or you can make them super safe. It's really totally up to you, which I find also kind of intriguing.
I think that's absolutely great advice, because that's something, when I went into the cavern zone in Mexico, I was definitely intrigued. And before I went there, I always kind of thought to myself, like, oh, that's not something that I'd be very interested in. But as soon as I got in there, I was like, I see the appeal. I want to know, kind of like what you were saying, like what's around that next corner. And fortunately, like, I have not been diving very long. I started in 2016. Even since 2016, I'm sure there's a higher level of training that's out there. So I feel that I can go and get some really good training to get in there to be safe. So it's definitely a goal of mine. It's not something that I'm in a rush. And in my part of the world, I know that there is some caves. I think that there's a little bit more exploring going on. I think you were out here not too long ago. I'm in Malaysia, but I think you were out in Indonesia diving some caves out there, I think I saw. And I know there's some exploring going on there. So it's something that has piqued my interest enough to where I do plan on seeking the proper training and kind of just dipping my toe in the water on that world. So it's something I'm definitely interested in.
Cool. Well, I hope you enjoy it.
Oh, no, I will. I'm sure I will. And so just to move it a little bit forward, so when you started going into, I guess just talk about how GUE, Global Underwater Explorers, was formed. I'm assuming you saw a need and you wanted to, or you saw a problem that you thought needed fixing, or just tell me about how that evolved.
Yeah, Global Underwater Explorers is a nonprofit organization. So I founded the organization for two main reasons, and they were an outgrowth of my experiences as an early cave diver and cave explorer. So on one side, I found that the training I had been receiving from fairly early period onward could have been done better in a number of ways. And in particular, the training didn't prepare me very well at all for the kinds of things that I ultimately ended up doing and wanted to be doing on a more regular basis. So even the cave training, which I confronted, was quite insufficient to manage the kinds of challenges that I was encountering as particularly a new cave explorer and to some extent a new cave diver. And then when I started to think about it, I realized that the inadequacies that I was experiencing had started earlier, meaning that things like buoyancy control were poorly emphasized during my open water, advanced open water kind of training. I was luckier than most because at the university setting, we were a group of cave divers who started to retrain ourselves and learn very quickly what the benefit was to better buoyancy, better position in the water, more refined types of propulsion kicks. But then as I started trying to teach myself as an instructor, I realized that the curriculum and the emphasis within all of the agencies was really wholly inadequate to kind of deal with a proper development of true core fundamental skills because all of the training was oriented around mass numbers, moving through the system as quickly as possible, and none of them were really oriented around high quality and comfort of the divers themselves, which is understandable from a business model perspective, and I don't even mean to say it as a derogatory criticism. I mean, if there wasn't these major agencies, I might not be a diver. So I certainly owe my diving development quite likely to the major agencies. But I realized that I really wanted to provide another opportunity for people who were interested in developing themselves in a better way, either to be more relaxed and comfortable while doing recreational dives or to be able to grow with a skill set that allowed them to do anything they wanted to do, be it deeper diving, wreck diving, ice diving, cave diving. And so I wanted to form a foundation, a nonprofit organization that removed the financial emphasis to push lots of people as quick as possible and focused instead on the quality. At the same time, as a nonprofit organization, I wanted to use the outgrowth of work I was already doing in the state of Florida and had started doing internationally, which was an effort to help work towards preservation of the aquatic realm. So as part of a nonprofit called the Woodville Karst Plane Project, or WKPP, is a large, vibrant exploration group still functioning in North Florida, mainly in the Tallahassee region. There's an amazing set of world-class caves there, and I spent the better part of my life working with that group in concert with governments and nonprofits and interested citizens to help preserve the groundwater, to study that environment, both from a biological perspective and from a water quality perspective. That led to an outgrowth of multiple research projects internationally, working with other governments and other nonprofits. And I wanted to take that experiences and give it an international footprint, build a bit on the concepts of enlightenment that Cousteau had started, meaning to educate people a bit about the environment, but then also to use the passion and enthusiasm, a kind of early citizen science effort, which has now become quite the terminology. But when we started GUE, there wasn't really good models for passionate divers to provide service for research projects on an international or even local basis. So I wanted to create that international footprint and allow local communities around the world to be supported by an international body, being GUE, in support of research and conservation projects in their various markets or environments around the world. So that's it in 25 years in 3 minutes.
So I obviously, I feel like once you start progressing, well, for me anyways, once I started progressing, I obviously heard and found out about GUE. Up until today, I have not taken a course, but I actually just reached out to an instructor to take a fundamentals course, because I think that's kind of one of those things. Once you start hearing about it, you're like, okay, that's a course that I want to go test the skills. I want to go see where I'm at. And I feel that I have some pretty decent skills, but I think that'll be a great way to put them to the test.
Well, good for you. And I think that's actually great that certified people consider, am I where I want to be? And by giving yourself a good bar, then I think you can accomplish that. So kudos to you, and thanks for giving us a try.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's been something that has been on the radar for a while, and I do enjoy the training aspect of it. I became I became a PADI instructor about 2 years ago, and I always knew that I wanted more for myself. And I feel the better that I am, obviously, the better that I could teach students. And so continually trying to push the bar higher and higher. So, but I moved to Malaysia about a year ago, and unfortunately, the area that I live in, there's no diving here. I have really good pools around my area, but we're about an hour flight from everywhere, which is a really nice place. So I could hop on a plane and be in a destination, really nice diving. So I was like, okay, well, what can I do? I can't really teach here, so I'll just continue my own education. And I've slowly started kind of moving into the technical world. And I reached out to, do you know Gemma? I think,
Yep.
Yeah, Gemma in Singapore.
For sure. I was going to recommend that actually, because she's teaching actively in that part of the world.
Yeah, I actually have been, I spoke to her 3 or 4, maybe 3 or 4 days ago about taking a fundamentals course, because I noticed that you guys offer it either as a whole fundamentals course, or you could do like fundamentals 1, fundamentals 2, and I wasn't quite sure which one that I wanted to pursue, so I just emailed her and was like, hey, can I chat with you a little bit about this? And I was actually I was like, hey, can you give me like a funny story that about, not a funny story about Jarrod, but something I can use as an icebreaker. It's nice to kind of lighten the mood as going in, because I'm always a little bit nervous when I'm speaking to certain people, and I'm like, oh, I got to interview Jarrod Jablonski, so I want to open it up, kind of fun.
Did she give you something?
She did not. I would have opened up.
Good job, Gemma.
I would have opened the conversation. I think she was just like, I'm not sure, or something like that, because she was saying that she was just diving with you in Indonesia, and she had just mentioned too, she's like that the cave systems there were very beautiful, and it kind of turned her more onto caves, I should say, that she was like, oh, okay, I could see the appeal. And I've heard that there's some very beautiful caves in that area of the world.
Indeed there are, yeah. There are some breathtaking vistas inside those caves, and we'll definitely return. Some really nice stuff there.
Okay, cool. Speaking, not to steer away from the GUE conversation, but just quick question. Do you have a favorite destination for caves? Is it still Florida, or what have been some top destinations that you've been to? Because I'm sure, and it might not even be caves, I'm sure you've have some different aspects.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I love cave diving, and it's been a huge part of my life, but I really love being underwater as sort of the primary goal. So I love different environments, maybe even somewhat equally. I love wall diving. That's some of my favorites. So any place that has steep wall drop-offs, I love that feeling, even if I'm not diving deep. I mean, I particularly like it when I have a underwater scooter and a rebreather and I can dive deep on a wall, but even without that, I still enjoy it. I think Florida is still near and dear to my heart. I've also been diving Mexico, for more or less the same amount of time, and I have a strong affinity for the amazing caves they have there. They have, 3 of the world's longest caves in the world, and at some point, I think those will all be connected into one massive cave, because they're all probably connected, almost certainly connected. and they have amazing formations there. Brazil certainly ranks very high on the list. That's a project I just returned from. I've been diving there since the 90s, and those caves are really breathtaking and massive in size, dropping very deep very quickly. In fact, scraping along the ceiling at 120 meters or 400 feet and not being able to see the floor or the walls around me. It feels like you stepped out of the space station or something. It's a really just amazing view. Everywhere is space, and you have this like little area that you're kind of clinging to in the middle of nowhere. I can't point to anything particular. I love so many different environments for their own unique benefits.
Okay. So my next question, when you know that you're about to do a dive of that scale, is there a mental prep, or like what kind of prep are you doing to go into that? Is there a routine that you have, or is it just, like you're like, okay, let me just zone out for 10 minutes, collect my thoughts, go on out, or what's the process going into something like that?
My OCD tendencies, I embellish them, whereas normally I try to moderate them. So, if it's particularly as the dives get more and more, let's just say, elaborate or aggressive, then I start to pay a lot of particular attention to the details, and I start to try to slow myself down a bit and make sure that I'm thinking through the equipment, the scenarios, making sure that I'm not forgetting things that might be important. So I become more methodical, and I allow that to play out in a bigger way. Because really the most complex part of big dives is there are quite a lot of logistics around them. There need to be quite a bit of redundancy built into the dive. You need to think a fair bit ahead of the kind of things that you want to guard against, the kinds of failures that you guard against. Now, absolutely, this gets easier. When I was a new cave explorer, I had no idea what I didn't know, and those were by far the most dangerous dives I'd ever done. Probably the first 5 or 10 years of my cave exploration, and certainly the first 3 to 5 years was by far much more dangerous just by being much simpler dives than I would do, a decade later. So I probably almost killed myself a half a dozen times in the first few years. And then I learned what I didn't know, and of course, the process of preparing for a dive like that became much more straightforward. And now we've spent a lot of time refining our training program so that people don't have to think as much and discover everything new for the first time. So our training really brings people all the way through up into the exploration grade knowledge base, where they can download, so to speak, the knowledge and experience of dozen explorers who have pioneered the way in cave and technical exploration, and have all of those things highlighted for them so that it's much more straightforward. They can develop their own checklists based on the intelligence, so to speak, gathered over several decades of active cave exploration. That was a long answer, but
I think it was about a year and a half ago, I took an intro to tech class with TDI, and that kind of opened up my eyes into the technical side of things, and got shown the DIR method, I should say. And probably about a year ago, or sometime last year, someone actually, I picked up a copy, someone gave me a copy of the beginning with end in mind. And that reading, I'm literally probably on my third read through it, because I really enjoy the stuff that's on there. It's very in depth, it's very detailed, and it goes into a lot of different stuff that you're not really taught in your basic recreational courses. So I think once I started reading that, it kind of opened up my mindset on training and just the things that I should pursue. And so I think that's a very, very good book. And I reached out to a shop to see if I could get the fundamentals of better diving. I think that's what it's called. So that's a goal of mine, to get through that reading, because you just came out with a new edition, 2021, I believe. And so it's definitely something that's piqued my interest. And I feel once you start kind of taking your diving more seriously, I feel like a lot of people start to kind of gravitate towards global underwater explorers. So it's nice because it's opening a new door, and I'm able to pursue something really fun and to get my skill level up to par. So I'm really, really looking forward to the fundamentals course, just because I think that'll be a great challenging class for me, as well as better my diving as an everyday diver. So
it'll be fun to hear what your thoughts are after you take the program. So
yeah,
it'd be nice to reconnect.
No.
I'll love your input.
No, for sure. That would be amazing. So my next question I wanted to ask is, I wanted to talk about Deep Dive Dubai. How did that all unfold?
Yeah, that was pretty interesting as well. Some of the principals here in Dubai who were developing the project reached out to me. Actually, I was on a series of global expeditions at the time on a research vessel in the Mediterranean, and they reached out and said that they were thinking of developing an interesting project in Dubai, and would I come and meet with them? To be honest, it was the furthest thing from my mind at the time, coming to the desert. So I was just kind of like, well, why would I want to come to the desert to develop diving? But I was familiar with the region. I've been traveling to the Middle East since the 90s as well. I did my first cave project in 1995 in Turkey. So I was familiar with the region, but I didn't really see the connection. Then I came here and met with the development group, and I was really deeply impressed with their commitment and their passion and their willingness to push boundaries. So I just agreed to support them as a consultant, coming every now and then to help refine the engineering drawings and the plans. And the project just kept taking on bigger and bigger scale, and they regularly just would ask, what can we do that people haven't done? What can we do that's exciting for people, exciting for divers? What would be really unique in the community? And it's really rare that you have, substantive investment from a group willing to cater to the diving industry. Really, diving manufacturers are one of the few with, money in the industry, so to speak. So, most dive shops are kind of just run by passionate enthusiasts. And so it was pretty neat to see that development opportunity, and I really became good friends with a lot of the people here. And then that project just kept growing in scale and took quite a long time to finalize, but it became, I think, a truly spectacular location that we're still continuing to develop. Just for your listeners who don't know, it's 60 meters or 200 feet deep, 15 million liters, which is a little under 4 million gallons, about the size of 6 Olympic-sized swimming pools by volume. So it's by far the deepest and about twice the size of anything else. And then the most interesting part is probably that the entire place, every square inch or millimeter or centimeter, depending on your frame of reference for units, is themed. So it's here we have a post-apocalyptic sunken city, cars and motorcycles and abandoned bedrooms and kitchens and living rooms. And so we spent quite a lot of time. We had up to 600 people on site at the peak of construction, scaffolding built all the way down to depth, and just a huge effort to build something truly spectacular. And we refined it, developed a really robust training curriculum, hired a very capable and skilled range of staff members, most of whom are also technical divers themselves. We have an in-house hyperbaric chamber that we can use for emergencies and research purposes. We have a range of research equipment here. We're just getting started in developing now that we've been around long enough to get the basic operations stable. We're now starting to engage some of these other community building and industry building opportunities like research programs and dive logging and community outreach. So it took a life of its own, but it's an amazing project here.
I've seen pictures and videos of that facility, and I'm just like, man, this would be something completely different that you've never, just to be able to dive in some of those environments. And I know it seems like it's become quite popular with free divers because they can go down there and get some really cool photo shoots in some of the environments that you guys have created there. So definitely look forward to my time when I can make it out there. I don't know when, but it's something that kind of got added to the bucket list destination of places just because.
Happy to give you a tour. It's a pretty interesting facility even just to visit, but I think it's a must dive at least once kind of opportunity. And the city itself isn't something I might have thought about 10 years ago, but I'm deeply impressed with how the principals in the city and the city planners and all of the individuals responsible for developing the area have made it such a really nice place to live, an amazingly connected, very tolerant and friendly, integrated society that is sort of gradually becoming a new geopolitical center. Lots of easy travel from this location, 6 hours from 2/3 of the world's population. So it's a great layover on the way to Maldives or many other Asian locations. And for me, it's amazing to be able to travel from here to almost anywhere on a direct flight. It's not such a bad place to live. Amazing culture and community for sure.
So are you living there full time now?
I am currently living here. I have a place here. I also spend a lot of time in Florida and then as well on international projects. So yes, I spend quite a lot of time here, especially over the years. We've been open, 2 years at the end of July. July 25th kind of marks our 2-year anniversary at the facility. So the last couple of years, I've spent quite a lot of time here getting project up and running and scaling it and making sure everything was running efficiently. And I can't complain. It's been hot in the summer, but the rest of the years is amazing weather as well.
Very cool, because I definitely didn't think when I started diving that I would add, because I don't consider it a pool, but it's just a different destination, I should say. Look forward to making it out there when I can. So, well, I want to thank you very, very much for coming on to the podcast today. I have one last question for you before we close it out. And I think you've kind of touched on this throughout the conversation, but if you could go back and you're speaking to yourself right out of open water, what advice would you give to that person? As far on a diving,
just scuba diving, right? Because that person made plenty of other mistakes that I could probably help him with, but
yes, just on a diving aspect.
All right, good. That's probably good for all of us. I would say that you don't even have an idea yet of the amazing environment and the truly spectacular opportunities and relationships that you build in this amazing industry. All of my best friends have really been forged in this kind of activity, and I think that it's really boundless. It's really only limited by your imagination and your motivation. So the world's your oyster, as it were. And I would say that go forth and enjoy every minute, but feel free to question at every step. Are you getting what you want out of it? Are you headed in the direction you like? During your training, I would recommend you try multiple instructors. Don't get hung up on one person and stay with them, whoever they teach for. Try several different instructors and different viewpoints. Try to find something that resonates with you. If something doesn't feel right, it may well not be right. So just because an authority tells you to do this thing doesn't mean it's necessarily the right thing to do. So ask a lot of good questions and try a lot of different things, and so you can find your rhythm. And then once you do that, I think, as I said, it's a wide open sport with endless opportunities, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I have.
Jarrod, thank you very, very much for coming on to the podcast today. I absolutely hope that we can have you back on, and I definitely will reach out to you either via email, or if you decide to come back on here, which I hope you do, I can give you a rundown on how the fundamentals course went, and hopefully I can get a good story out of Gemma to tell me about you. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, you never know. I'll be curious to hear the story, but particularly curious to hear how your fundamentals course worked and how you enjoyed it, and to get some direct and positive feedback and negative feedback if you have any. We always work to improve those programs. Thanks very much to you for trying, and thanks for your time today and that of your listeners. So if you're still with us, I appreciate you listening to me prattle on. It's been great chatting with Nick, and I hope you found something here you find useful, and I hope to return. Thanks very much, Nick, and best to everyone.
Offgassing, a Scuba Podcast.